Hi. So last week I ended up doing something that I had never done on this channel before, but something that I was really excited and really proud to do. A lot of people talk online about LARPing or political hobbyism or whatever you want to use. Basically, talking a lot of game, but not really doing anything meaningful, right? I think that recently there's been a really strong calling to try and do something more as online creators. Of course, there have been a lot of creators who've gone and canvassed for various political races and who have been very involved in the electoral process. And I wanted to use some of my experience as uh, someone who's studying the law and someone who works in government to try and take that to the next level. I am actually very familiar with the legislative process at this point. I just took legislation and I am actually currently working at the state and federal levels in legislatures. And so I figured that because it's actually very easy to do so, that I would testify in front of the Maryland Congress concerning a bill that would get rid of the trans panic defense. Uh, and yeah, that's what it would do. It'd be pretty chill. The video that you're about to watch is the attempt at doing that, so strap in and see you on the other side. To catch everyone up, I'm going to have a minute to speak. It's not a lot of time. That's how it goes over. So I scripted my testimony out. I have it basically pre-prepared. I've timed everything. It should be fine. And then I will be asked questions after if there are any other questions for them to ask me, right? That's the name of the game. With the webcam, you can actually get my whole bookcase, which has been kind of absent from the shot for a while. I have a lot of books behind me, so I must read a lot. I'm very smart.
And it's not like it's Harry Potter or something.
It's not Harry Potter. Now, some of it is Elder Scrolls Online and Yu-Gi-Oh! So hopefully they will
but
not...
you can't tell.
You can't tell. Like, listen, like...
World famous ESO streamer.
Yeah, like the books look professional. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is for intellectuals. You're goddamn right it is. People who are in the call, can you summarize for me very quickly? I'm reading over the summaries that you prepared. Thank you very much. Can people summarize for me very quickly some of the main findings from the work that y'all have done?
So yeah, I read the paper, The Trans Panic Defense, Masculinity, Heteronormativity, and the Murder of Transgender Women. It's mostly for, it's not really for legislative action. They advocate for prosecutors showing how the defense is bad, because it already is banned by the ABA in 2013.
No,
Just do that.
Yeah, that basically matches up with my understanding. So just to basically give people an understanding, basically what we're talking about is, like, usually the way that it comes up, it's usually not to try and get people completely off the hook. It's usually used as a way to try and mitigate a charge of murder to voluntary manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter having the same three first elements as common law murder, the unlawful killing of another. So when we're talking about voluntary manslaughter, they have the same basic first four elements, but then they also have for mens rea that the killing must be done in a heat of passion, in a reasonable response to a sudden provocation. The nature of the provocation would lead a reasonable person, and this is the important part, the reasonable person of average emotional fortitude to act in the same kind of reasonable passion, and there was a causal connection between the provocation and the victim, and between the provocation and the killing, right? Or does anyone else want to summarize like what they found over the course of their research?
It may be best for Grayson to do so if Grayson is free. His paper was more relevant than the one I read, I believe.
Okay, yeah, Grayson, do you have anything?
Yeah, let me pull up what I wrote real quick just so I have my notes on me. But I mean, a lot of it is pretty straightforward. So a lot of what I found really relates to how it's mostly used to lower charges, obviously. The bigger thing that I've noticed is it talks a lot about how the defense is used without being overtly used, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, the defense constantly like misgendering and dead naming and things like that, the victim of the crimes. And what that has led to, like, in some cases, it's successful only because that victim has like a family that's accepting and will correct the defense on the spot when they're doing questioning and testimony and things like that, and be like, hey, excuse me, no, that is my sister and her name is, whatever. But when they don't, and the studies were showing that when they don't have those families there to kind of like do that for them, chances are more likely that even if they're not outright trying to use the defense in like a really like kind of vulgar, gross way, I think using it at all is kind of gross. When they don't have family there to do that, chances are far more likely that that's going to be successful, and they're going to serve a lot less time in jail. And in some cases, it's actually even resulted in the person just being charged for like the assault, but not the murder of someone who is like
Really?
trans based on that defense.
Wait. So that comes down. Wait,
Which
hold
is
on. That comes
pretty
down to
fucked.
charging.
Yeah.
Is that right?
It's like in one case, what happened, it ended up being ruled in a mistrial
Okay.
because the jury couldn't come to an agreement when they had used that defense. So even though in the sense that like, oh, it wasn't successful in bringing the charges down to manslaughter, it was even better because it resulted in a mistrial. And by the time they brought the guy up on charges a second time, it ended up being he had negotiated it down further than that even.
Gotcha.
To where he was like, oh, the murder was fine because that makes sense that you were like in the heat of moment and passion, but you're still going to be charged for like assault and battery.
Okay, that's really good. If you could like DM me that
So like it wasn't
specifically.
like a direct like verdict, but it was like gave him time to. Yeah, let me pull the main paper and I'll find the
Go ahead and
passage and send it to
DM
you.
that to me, because I do think that one reasonable thing I could get, or one question I could reasonably expect, is basically, oh, well, I understand that you're saying this is terrible, but realistically, how often is this used? It seems like it's not used that, very often, or it's not successful very often at all. And it's like, it may not be successful very often, but it doesn't really matter. But like, the fact of the matter is, just because it's not successful in mitigating a charge often does not mean that there's not still harm that's caused, either at a societal level or in instances like these, right? All right, I gotta hop out. It's 1:27. I'm gonna hop into the Zoom call, and I will talk to y'all later. All right?
All right.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Bye. All right, fam. Now, basically, what's going to happen is that they are going to let me in at a certain point when it is my turn to testify. They're going to call me in. Chairman is going to introduce me, and then I'm going to have 1 minute. 1 minute only. This is some Escanor level shit, all right? We have 1 fucking minute to be able to deliver exactly what we are looking to do. There's my testimony. There it is. Very short, sweet, to the point. Are you nervous? A little bit, but I mean like a healthy amount of nerves. It's good to have like a good, healthy amount of nerves in these kind of situations. I'll put it in the way that like the head coach of my mock trial program puts it. If you don't have nerves, even if you are competing at like the highest level, then you aren't doing it right, you know? All right, here's the most important thing. All right, here's the thing I want everyone to take from this. I am doing something right now that anyone is able to do. All right? Like what we are about to do, anyone watching, any of you could have done the same thing. There are limited spots for testimony and they have to assign it, but like there's a good chance that the reason that they assigned me to give oral testimony is because the written testimony that we submitted together was such a high quality that they're like, okay, this person is actually going to contribute something meaningful to say, right? Like any of you could do this. Riley runs for Congress live on stream. Listen, if it's not me, someone will do it and they will succeed and they will like, this will become the norm. A couple years from now, every politician or like every major politician is going to be like streaming daily on Twitch or whatever the popular platform is at that time, right? Like I can guarantee it. People are going to be like running for congressional campaigns while playing Minecraft streams, right? I like that is not a prediction. That is a prophecy. And I am... But Riley, how does Project Green work? Shut the fuck up. I mean, I gotta think if I'm gonna like shout myself out. That's a real question. One thing I was joking about with people last night is that like at the end of it, I'm gonna obviously say like, thank you. Just like very short, sweet, simple, to the point. And I was messing around. I was like, maybe I should be like, thank you, Will. And just like not make a big deal out of it. I have to like be like super stone faced, solid, and just be like, no. And they'll be like, I'm sorry, Miss Roshong, did you just ooh at us? I'd be like, what? No, obviously not. We are setting a precedent, you know? Like, we are setting the precedent for how other people in similar positions are going to be perceived by legislative bodies in the future, you know? And I want to set a high precedent. I want to set a high bar. It's like, listen, when people from these online communities come and show up, we mean business.
Delegate Brooks, House Bill 80. But I said your name right? And we have...
Yeah, so for the record, I'm Delegate Julie
I said her
Palakovich
name,
Carr,
yep.
here to present House Bill 231. This legislation would prohibit use of the panic defense in Maryland courts. As noted by the chair, yes, this bill did pass the committee last year. It in fact passed unanimously, and it passed the House with only one dissenting vote before running out of time in the Senate. I certainly hope we can get this across the finish line this year and make Maryland the 12th to ban the use of the panic defense.
All right, CP Hoffman.
Hello, thank you, Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm CP Hoffman, the Legal Director at FreeState Justice, which is Maryland's LGBTQ advocacy organization. Despite significant advances in recent years, LGBTQ Marylanders continue to be subjected to intense discrimination and violence at rates significantly higher than other communities in the state and across the nation. This violence also hits transgender individuals and queer people of color especially harshly. Unfortunately, Maryland law currently allows criminal defendants to rely on the panic defense to mitigate their offenses, allowing them to get away with murder and assault of LGBTQ plus Marylanders. As I explained in my written testimony, which I encourage you all to look at, the panic defense can take a number of forms, but in most cases, it's premised on the idea that the victim's sexual orientation or gender identity somehow provokes the defendant, or that they were so psychologically upset by someone's gender identity or sexual orientation that they lose self-control and act violently to the victim. While it's not a total defense, we found multiple cases in Maryland where defendants have successfully had first-degree murder charges reduced to either second-degree murder or into voluntary manslaughter. Maryland law should not condone this violence against the LGBTQ plus community. And just as this legislature acted in 1997 to eliminate similar defenses in spousal murder cases, I ask the committee today to support HB 231.
Thank you very much. Sasha Bookert, and I may have butchered your last name. I apologize for that.
No, that was actually great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Clippinger and members of the committee. My name is Sasha Bookert, and I'm a senior attorney at Lambda Legal, and I'm testifying in support of the bill. LGBTQ people and transgender women of color in particular move through the world under the constant threat of impending violence. In the words of one transgender woman of color in a New York Times article recently stated, "It's always in the forefront of our minds when we're leaving home, going to work, going to school." The fear is well substantiated. In 2020, there were 44 reported murders of transgender or gender nonconforming people across the country, the vast majority of whom were transgender women of color, which is likely a significant undercount. Similar legislation to HB 231 has been passed in multiple states, as has already been mentioned, and similar legislation is pending in many states as well. Allowing this defense dehumanizes LGBTQ people and sends a message to other defendants or would-be assailants and to the public that they can always rely upon this to mitigate any punishment. The panic defense uses the bias of jurors and the judge to their advantage, and it perpetuates anti-LGBT stigma and suggests, as the ABA points out, it runs contrary to our constitutional values as a society, and it should be eliminated before it can be used again. We urge the committee to advance this important legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mark Eckstein.
Good afternoon, Chair Clippinger, Vice Chair Atterbury, and members of this Judiciary Committee. My name is Mark Eckstein, and as a parent, I strongly support this bill, HB 231. I'm co-chair of advocacy for Metro DC PFLAG, and also work with many LGBTQ students throughout Maryland. When I interact with these students, panic bias defense is one of the most important issues for them. And not only is this specific defense ban needed, but this legislation also sends a very powerful message, especially to our youth, that violence cannot be a response just because you're uncomfortable with someone. So I urge a favorable report on House Bill 231. Thank you and stay safe.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Merrick Moises.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings, distinguished chair and members of this committee. My name is Merrick Moses Moise, and I'm a victim advocate with the Office of the State's Attorney for Baltimore City. I've been an advocate within the LGBTQ community for 19 years and a community peace activist since 1990. And in my travels, I've met many queer and trans people who are afraid of the criminal justice system, believing that they will not be treated fairly or justly. They have witnessed their queer and trans siblings in community not receiving the justice that they desperately seek. Case in point, Mia Henderson was a young trans woman killed in Baltimore City in July 2014. During the trial of her alleged killer, defense counsel weaponized her gender identity. The public defender asked her own witness if Mia, quote unquote, looked like a boy or a girl at the time she was last seen. And during closing arguments, the public defender told the jury that Mia hadn't even had sex reassignment surgery yet. Mia's family and friends were shocked, and disgusted by the public defender's crass attempt to reduce Mia to her body parts. And yes, this happened in Baltimore City with a Baltimore City public defender. My hope today is that we begin seeing LGBTQ people with dignity and respect and not reducing people to their body parts or surgeries. We are a very vulnerable community that continues to fight for dignity daily, and the American Psychiatric Association has debunked the gay panic defense in its manuals. It is high time that the state of Maryland ban LGBTQ defense. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good seeing you.
Very good seeing you. Maybe there may be further questions.
Okay.
Amy Grace Alexander.
Hi, everyone. Professionally, I'm the Legislative Outreach Coordinator here at the ACLU of Maryland, but today I'm here representing the interests of Baltimore's Black trans community, whose oppression is upheld by the trans panic defense. Though the bill has been revised to include several other identity protections, I'm here to specifically address the origins and consequences of this defense for gay and trans community. First, it's important to state that disclosure should always be left to the discretion of the LGBT person in order to reduce already disproportionate violence. This issue is deep-reaching, though its highest consequence. Professionally, I'm the legislative for people like me, Black trans women who stand the most to lose from outing and other phobic violence. 4 years ago, the murderer of Mia Henderson, the 26-year-old victim of a brutal stabbing, was acquitted using this defense. Her death in 2014 was felt deeply in our community, as was the October 1996 murder of Anthony Gabriel Barnes by Charles Garney in Prince George's County, Maryland. The panic defense is at the extreme end of transphobia and homophobia, and because it's only used long after violence has taken place, its only purpose is to legitimize that violence. The real panic is the fear of being discovered in your natural state, that the peace of your passing be disturbed, the unrest in knowing that your offender would suffer less because of who you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll take some questions here and then we'll go into the next group. Are there questions for this panel? Riley Roshong, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my name is Riley and I use she, her pronouns. Currently, I serve as the co-chair for the Outlaw Student LGBT organization at the University of Maryland School of Law, as well as serve on the board of directors for FreeState Justice. Naturally, this issue is important to me. Last year in criminal law and while clerking for the Organized Crime Division of the Maryland Attorney General's office, I learned about the type of homicide that the trans panic defense would be used against. To try and mitigate a charge of murdered voluntary manslaughter, defendants would argue that their killing was justified because they were acting in a heat of passion where any other reasonable person would have also killed the victim for acting deceptive. To not mince words, what they're literally arguing, and what we allow them to argue, is that their murder was justified because any other reasonable person in society would have also killed the victim because they are trans. They argue that trans victims' lives, as well as my life, are worth less than others just by virtue of who we are. This is why passing House Bill 231 is necessary. My life is worth just as much as everyone else's here, as everyone else in this call. And it's an injustice that the law does not reflect that. Please give a favorable report on House Bill 231. You did so last session, and I'm asking that you do so again. Thank you.
Darcy Kemnitz.
Hi, my name is Darcy Kemnitz, and I'm the Executive Director of the National LGBT Bar Association. We were formed over 30 years, sorry, starting my timer. Formed over 30 years ago by a small group of family law practitioners at the very height of the HIV/AIDS crisis. And we are leading an effort to ban the panic defenses across the country, and I've submitted written testimony. You know, they teach us in law school that criminal law does two things. It provides a set of rules and actual punishments for people who break a very well understood boundary, but it also gives a sense of where that boundary stands. And so this proposed bill sends a message about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And may I just say, as it relates to victims on this, I'd like to bring you back to the year 2000, in which Monsignor Wells was stabbed in his own, in Mother Seton Parish. And weeks later, that defendant said he was going to sexually assault me. Weeks after the stabbing, this individual came up with that defense. So those are the kinds of cases where this is used, Delegate Bartlett, and I urge your passing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and now Gavin Potashnik.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. It's good to see everyone, even though it's on Zoom. Really, I'm here to talk about the amendment component of this. The MSAA is in support of this bill. We're favorable with amendments. The whole point of the amendment is really to strengthen the intent of the bill. When you're dealing with mitigation, you're dealing with degree. And for degree of murder is really wrapped up in the why it is that you committed the murder versus the murder itself. At the end of the day, you still have a dead body. When it comes to assault, the degree of assault is really wrapped up in the extent of the injury. So if somebody's arm is chopped off, then that is obviously a first-degree assault. Versus somebody's slapped, even though somebody says, "I'm going to kill you," that is not a first-degree assault. So for us, if you want to help us out to make sure that this will work in court, really the best way to implement this is to bar the defense completely as it respects to assault, rather than make it a mitigation factor in the assault world. And so we're favorable with that amendment. Thank you so much.
All right. I apologize to Delegate Palakovich Carr. I missed that Mr. Potashnik was on the list, and I would have asked him about his amendment, but now he's talked about it and you've talked about it, so we've all talked about it. Great. Are there questions for that second panel? Seeing none. Thank you all very, very much. That concludes the testimony for House Bill 231. Are you waving, Delegate McComas? All right, Delegate McComas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have some questions, and they're not necessarily on point, but I assume everybody's familiar with some of the Dirty Harry movies, where, how many rounds did I shoot? I think a lot of times I assume that none of the folks that are being harmed, the transgender folks, are get the ability for the right to carry. Is that a pretty good assumption? I mean, does the community try to get the right to carry to protect themselves since they are a vulnerable class?
If I could answer that, anecdotally, I have heard of specifically Black trans women fearing for their lives trying to get permits. So that's happening right now.
Well, but do they receive the ability to the right to carry to protect?
I've only heard about people wanting to carry. I haven't heard them being prohibited to carry, but it is an issue in the transgender community.
The other question I have is there any movement within this community to learn self-defense? Either some of those, I guess there's Chinese and Japanese different ways to basically you use the, what do I want to say, the force of the other person to protect yourself. It's kind of, I guess, like jujitsu or something.
I think the issue here is that of the gay panic defense, and not whether transgender people or LGBT people should be going out and getting firearms in order to protect themselves. So to that end, if you have a question about the gay panic defense, we can talk about that. But if we're going to ask questions about that, but if we're going afield here, I'm going to try and bring us back. Do you have a question on the panic defense?
I just wanted to contribute momentarily on that idea.
Sure.
As someone who is testifying in favor of the bill, it sounds very troubling that essentially that kind of thought process would lead us into a position where, sure, we can tell trans people to buy guns, but then if they happen to be unsuccessful in defending themselves, then the law would not offer them any recourse if they tried to use that defense, or if their perpetrators try to use that defense in the court of law. The problem isn't with the fact that they could defend themselves. The problem was with the fact that, like, this defense can be used at all. Like, I don't think that bringing up the fact that they could buy guns addresses the underlying issue that the bill is trying to address. And that's it, fam. Drop the mic.